February 24th, 2010. What was supposed to be another awe-inspiring performance at SeaWorld Orlando quickly turned into an unthinkable tragedy. Dawn Brancheau, a seasoned orca trainer with years of experience, stood poolside, engaging in what seemed like a routine interaction with Tilikum, the largest whale killer in captivity. Spectators marveled at the bond between trainer and animal, unaware that within moments the scene would descend into horror. As she signaled to the massive orca, an unexpected and terrifying chain of events unfolded, one that would leave witnesses in shock and forever change the world of marine entertainment. The very creature she had dedicated her life to would turn on her in a brutal and relentless attack, sending shockwaves through SeaWorld and beyond. This is the tragic story of Dawn Brancheau's final moments, the warnings, the overlooked signs, and the devastating loss that would bring a harsh spotlight onto the reality of orca captivity. But before we uncover the chilling details of that fateful day, we must first look back at the life and passion of the woman who devoted herself to the ocean's most powerful predators. Dawn Brancheau was born on April 16, 1969 in Indiana. From an early age, she was captivated by marine life, particularly the majestic orcas she saw at SeaWorld. Her dream of becoming a marine animal trainer was solidified at just 10 years old during a family trip to SeaWorld Orlando, where she witnessed a shamu show for the first time. The young girl was mesmerized, telling her mother, "This is what I want to do." Unlike many childhood dreams that fade over time, Dawn's passion only grew stronger. Determined to turn her dream into reality, Dawn pursued a degree in psychology and animal behavior at the University of South Carolina. She understood that working with highly intelligent marine mammals required not only physical stamina, but also deep psychological insight. After graduation, she spent 2 years working with dolphins at an attraction in New Jersey, honing her skills before landing her dream job at SeaWorld in 1994. Dawn started her career working with sea lions and otters before transitioning to orca training in 1996. Her dedication, discipline, and love for marine animals set her apart, quickly making her one of SeaWorld's most respected trainers. Dawn was known for her deep connection with the orcas, particularly with Tilikum, the massive male orca who had been transferred to SeaWorld in 1992 after a troubled history at other marine parks. Her role at SeaWorld was physically demanding and required constant training. She lifted weights, ran and cycled to maintain peak physical condition, understanding that working with creatures as powerful as orcas required strength, agility, and endurance. In a 2000 television interview, she spoke about the importance of staying fit, emphasizing how trainers had to be in top shape to work safely with the marine giants. Among the many orcas Dawn worked with, Tilikum stood out. Known affectionately as Tilly, he was a 12,000-pound, 22-foot-long killer whale, the largest in captivity. Dawn had spent years bonding with Tilikum, believing that mutual trust was at the core of their relationship. However, Tilikum had a dark and complicated past, one that SeaWorld had downplayed. Captured in Iceland in 1983 at just 2 years old, he was separated from his pod and placed in captivity at Sealand of the Pacific, a now defunct marine park in Canada. There, he endured a harsh environment, confined to a small tank and subjected to aggression from dominant female orcas. Trainers reported that Tilikum was frequently bullied, often emerging with rake marks from attacks by his tank mates. The stress of captivity took its toll, and in 1991, tragedy struck. A 20-year-old marine biology student, Kelty Byrne, accidentally fell into the orca tank at Sealand. What followed was a horrifying spectacle. Tilikum, along with 2 female orcas, pulled her underwater, preventing her escape. Kelty drowned in the pool while horrified staff and guests looked on, unable to intervene in time. Following the incident, Sealand shut down and Tilikum was transferred to SeaWorld Orlando in 1992. Despite this past, SeaWorld continued to feature Tilikum in performances, bringing in millions of dollars in revenue. Trainers, including Dawn, were assured that proper training techniques and strict safety protocols would prevent further incidents. Yet, another mysterious death occurred in 1999 when a homeless man was found deceased in Tilikum's tank. The man who had allegedly sneaked into SeaWorld overnight was discovered floating on Tilikum's back. The exact details of his death remain unclear, but the incident raised serious questions about Tilikum's behavior. Despite these warnings, SeaWorld continue using Tilikum in performances, branding him as one of their main attractions. Trainers were required to follow specific safety protocols, and direct contact with Tilikum was heavily restricted. However, Dawn, who had worked with him extensively, felt comfortable enough to engage in close interactions during shows. Some trainers had concerns about Tilikum's unpredictable nature, but Dawn remained confident in her abilities. She had built a bond with a massive orca, believing that trust and consistency would prevent any dangerous encounters. However, Tilikum was still a wild animal, not a domesticated performer, and his past suggested that tragedy could strike at any moment. On February 24, 2010, Dawn was preparing for the Dine with Shamu show, a special performance where guests could watch trainers interact with orcas while enjoying an outdoor meal. It was a routine she had performed countless times before, and the bond between her and Tilikum seemed as strong as ever. But something was different that day. In just a few moments, everything would change. What happened next would become one of the most infamous incidents in marine park history, one that would raise serious ethical concerns about keeping killer whales in captivity and lead to sweeping changes in the industry. The Dawn Brancheau had performed this routine countless times before, her presence in the water a testament to her experience and confidence. However, something went terribly wrong. After a successful performance earlier in the day, Dawn stayed behind for a training session with Tilikum, the 12,000-pound orca she'd worked with for years. The audience members, dining at the nearby underwater viewing area, watched as she engaged with a massive killer whale. It all seemed routine, until the unthinkable happened. Witnesses reported that Tilikum suddenly grabbed Dawn by her ponytail and yanked her into the water. Some initially believed it was part of the act, but it quickly became clear that something was terribly wrong. The massive orca began thrashing violently, dragging Dawn underwater and shaking her with tremendous force. Some reports suggest that Tilikum had initially latched onto her arm or shoulder rather than her hair. Regardless of the exact point of contact, the attack was swift and brutally violent. The force of Tilikum's movements left Dawn defenseless as the whale repeatedly pulled her under the water and slammed her against the tank walls. SeaWorld staff rushed to intervene, desperately attempting to distract Tilikum with food and nets, but he refused to let go. Trainers pounded on the sides of the pool, signaling him to release Dawn, but their efforts were in vain. The massive whale, conditioned to perform on command for years, had now taken full control of the situation in a terrifying display of power. For over 45 minutes, Tilikum continued to thrash and hold on to Dawn's lifeless body. The emergency response team scrambled to drain the pool in a desperate attempt to force the whale into a smaller area where he could be controlled. Eventually, they succeeded in coaxing him into a medical pool where the gates could be closed. Only then did he finally release Dawn's body. By the time her body was recovered, it was too late. Dawn Brancheau was pronounced dead at the scene, her body bearing the horrifying evidence of the ferocity of the attack. The official autopsy report later revealed the full extent of her injuries. A portion of her scalp and hair had been completely torn off, found at the bottom of the pool. Her jawbone, ribs and part of her vertebrae had been shattered. Tilikum's thrashing had dislocated one of her elbows and severed her spinal cord. Despite the extensive trauma, the cause of death was ultimately ruled as drowning in combination with blunt force trauma. SeaWorld employees and guests were left in a state of shock and horror. Dawn had been a beloved figure, a trainer who had dedicated her life to these magnificent creatures, only to become the victim of one in a gruesome and prolonged struggle. The attack on Dawn Brancheau sent shockwaves through the marine park industry. How could an experienced trainer, someone who had worked closely with Tilikum for years, fall victim to such a violent and relentless assault? What had triggered this attack? Some pointed to Tilikum's troubled history, arguing that his violent past had been ignored for too long. Others questioned the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity, arguing that these highly intelligent and social animals were never meant to be confined to small tanks. Dawn Brancheau was more than just an orca trainer. She was a dedicated professional, an advocate for marine animals, and an inspiration to those who knew her. Her passion for marine life extended beyond her work at SeaWorld. She was known for her kindness, her commitment to conservation efforts, and her ability to connect with animals in ways few could understand. Her death sent shockwaves through the industry, igniting heated debates about the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity. The tragedy led to significant changes in SeaWorld's practices, including the end of trainer-orca water interactions and ultimately the decision to phase out its orca breeding program. Dawn's family, rather than focusing on how she died, chose to honor her legacy through the Dawn Brancheau Foundation, which continues to support animal welfare, children's charities, and community service projects. Dawn Brancheau's story is one of passion, dedication, and ultimately, tragedy. Her life was a testament to the beauty and complexity of human-animal relationships, but her death raised profound questions that still linger today. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe.